Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 28th meeting of the Legislative Action Committee. Glad to have you all back on. Sorry about having some time off, but glad to see that you didn't forget about us in the meantime. Very happy to give you some updates on some things that are happening. Hopefully, you'll also have some things that you can report back to the full group as well. Love to have that input from you about things that are happening on the ground in your communities. So with that, I want to just introduce Laurel Birchfield is here and Jason Weller are both here. And Jason, I'm going to hand it off to you for some of the housekeeping stuff.
Okay, so I see a lot of names that are familiar, so that's a good sign. But just as a reminder for those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, especially with these calls, because we do have about 20 to 30 people on average, we keep everybody's mics muted. If you have a question or a comment, concern, the best thing to do is the toolbox on the right-hand side. There's a questions box. You can click on that, type in your question, comment, concern, whatever, hit send, and we'll be monitoring that throughout today's meeting. Also, the other thing that I want to point out is that we have the slides available for download. So again, right-hand side, toolbox, handouts, and that is where you will find the slide deck. And I think that's it, although we have poll questions, and I'm looking at Laurel to see if we're...
Not yet.
Okay.
We'll do some poll questions in a little bit.
Okay, so stay tuned for that. Exciting things are coming your way.
And of course, if you have any issues with audio, let us know, but also know that you may need to log out and log back in again. Sometimes that solves the problem. But we also sometimes have internet issues here, so if you have any trouble hearing us, just send us a message and let us know. There you go. All right, on to our agenda. I'll take it away.
Why don't you do that?
I'll do that.
Update.
So we always start with our policy priorities. These were things that were identified last year as priorities for the legislative session of 19 and 20. There's not a lot to report with these first two, but just want to keep you guys in the loop. Source of income protection is something that we've been working on with a representative for the past several months. We put it on hold a little bit while the budget got a little crazy, and we've had a couple other legislators, both on the House and Senate side, express some interest. So we're going back through and deciding how to introduce this. Still very much of interest to those legislators, and we do want to see it be introduced this year. Just last Friday, a whole group of legislators introduced Senate Bill 602, which adds domestic violence victims to the protected class under Elliott Larson, which is our Civil Rights Act here in the state of Michigan. So that is a very new bill for this session. It tends to get introduced every session, every 2 years. So we'll see what happens. Elliott Larson is a very tricky piece of legislation to try and amend, especially given our current makeup of our legislature. But we will be following that and see if that adding domestic violence survivors to our protected classes has any impact on source of income, because that is one avenue we were considering with Elliott Larson, or if it, how it moves forward within the Senate right now. And again, that is Senate Bill 602. Sorry, I don't have it on the PowerPoint because I just found it, but that's something we're following. The second item on here for our policy priorities is our landlord mitigation fund. This is the concept of having the state designate some funds to put aside in kind of an insurance pool for landlords and property managers to access if they rent to tenants who they may not normally rent to, and incur any additional losses of rent or damages because of it. This is going to sound like a broken record for many of you, but we know that the data shows that there's not actually an increased risk with renting to these folks, but the insurance fund does encourage landlords to be to take some more risk on their part and rent to some folks who they might not, such as voucher holders, people with a criminal record. And so we're investigating that. It was introduced on the House side, I believe, in the budget this year, but it did not make it to the final cut. Having some conversations with legislators who introduced that, and there is interest in maybe seeing this move forward next year. So we're not going to see this year. We're going to be doing some more research to make sure we have what we need to have it be successful. And we are looking at maybe bringing it back for next year after the holidays, but still part of this legislative session. So that's all I have for those two policy priorities. Sorry, we aren't moving faster with them, but we are chugging along. But on to some other news. I'll pass it along to Jason to talk about the vital docs.
Okay, so House Bills 4152 and 4153, as a quick reminder, are focused on making it easier and more affordable for folks who need to get their birth records from the MCAH Central Registry. And the bills allow for the local county clerk's office to charge the same rate that they would typically charge, as opposed to having to charge the central registry fees. So these bills did make it through the House earlier this year before the summer recess in the budget conversation. They are currently in the Senate waiting for a committee hearing. At this point, nobody's hearing anything, but I think that that's not likely. There's a couple of things at play with the budget update and the MCAH funding for vital docs. Seems like it's taken a lot of folks' energy. At least that was the source of, that's what folks were saying at the last State ID Task Force meeting. So there's a chance these bills could come back, or could keep moving forward, I should say. But at this point, it's a bit unclear what their future holds.
So now on to budget.
One of the most exciting things of all. So this is one area where we actually had a couple of wins coming out of the budget process.
Well, let's back up and just make sure everybody knows where we are with the budget process first, because it's a very confusing process this year. Typically, the budget is settled and final by this time with the beginning of the fiscal year for the state, that being October 1st, but it is still being kind of sorted out through some supplemental bills this year. The governor, in case you haven't been following the news, the governor did receive appropriation bills from the legislature and then decided to do some line item vetoing and some moving of funds within the departments, which is not a very commonly used tactic of the governor. And it is causing a bit of some unknowns right now about what actually is going to be happening moving forward and where the money is going to be going. So we do know some things that have not been vetoed by the governor, and I think that's where you were headed, Jason, talking about some of the things that were included in the final version. Yeah.
So thanks for that explanation, Laurel. So there was funding for the Vital Docs program through MDHHS, and that's something that we have been talking about since the beginning of the year, essentially. So that was very cool to see that was still in there, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that program looks like in a minute. And then the other piece was the funding, increased funding for the ESP program. So there was concern that when this fiscal year expired, that the $18 that the per diem rate for ESP was going to revert back to $16 because the $2 increase that came through lame duck last year was set to expire. But that is now locked in place. So ESP is at 18, and we got Vital Docs funding. So as well as some other smaller things which we'll mention in a few minutes. But those are the two big items that I think most of the folks on this call have been paying attention to.
But of course, we lost some things too. So the Runaway and Homeless Youth Fund had gone in for a decent increase, as well as a continuation of some funding that passed during lame duck and supplemental last year. The increase made it all the way to the governor and then was vetoed. And I know we've got some folks on the call. It looks like we've got some folks on the call who were much more active in advocating for that. But we don't know anything other than it was vetoed at this point. We also saw that education got some hits, in particular the Michigan Tuition Grant, which is something that does help low-income college students access private colleges, has been vetoed completely. So there's no funding for that right now. Also, at the public school level, the At-Risk Students Fund did receive a small increase, but the governor did go in with a much larger ask of $102 million for the at-risk students, which does include students experiencing homelessness. I believe they only got the $5 million out of that $102 million ask that the governor put in at the beginning of the year. Lots of other analysis on the budget. I'm going to direct you to the Michigan League for Public Policy. They have some really great reporting right now about what the budget looks like, what winners and losers kind of came out of that, and they're a really good resource for understanding beyond just our focus of housing and homelessness. They're a really great resource for understanding what the budget looks like right now. All right, anything else that you'd like to add about the state budget? And I don't see any questions coming in, but feel free to send us questions at any time. If we don't have the answer for you, we will find it. All right, so state updates. So the asset test, this is new news that just came out recently. The governor has issued for DHHS to increase the amount of assets that an individual and family can have to qualify for food assistance, family independence program, and state emergency relief. In the past, that was a $5,000 asset cap, and it's now gone up to $15,000 for each one of those programs, which will allow more families to access those services and those resources. So a win for low-income families and individuals in the state. That takes effect December 1st. In addition to that, we have some bad news about the Medicaid work requirements. That will be taking effect at the beginning of the year. And though there has been some legislation at the state level passed to kind of loosen up the reporting requirements, it is still moving forward that people are going to have to start reporting and have to meet some more strict requirements to qualify for Medicaid. I've linked on the PowerPoint the DHHS regional forums. There are several that are still going to be happening for the rest of the year through November. The next one coming up is in Detroit on October 30th. If you click on that link from the downloaded PDF that you can reach on the handouts on GoToWebinar, you can access the website to be able to register for those forums. It's a good resource for providers and clients who want to know more about how they can still stay within the requirements of Medicaid and make sure that they don't get dropped from that programming. I've also linked to the exemption form. Being unable to work due to medical conditions linked to homelessness, I believe is how they have it, does qualify you for an exemption for these Medicaid work requirements, but you have to fill out the form. I believe those have been mailed out from the department this month, but if you have not received any information about that, you can download the exemption form, again, on the PDF that's linked to GoToWebinar. Anything else about Medicaid that you guys want to chime in on? Okay. So two other bills that I just want to make, or technically three other bills that I want to make you guys aware of at the state level. Bed bugs, this is something that comes up, it has been coming up for quite a while now, has been reintroduced. We talked about it back in July, I believe, but we didn't have the bill number. So I've linked you to House Bill 4777. This bill would kind of take it would put the responsibility on the tenant with regards to alleviating bed bugs rather than on the property manager or the landlord, and obviously is something that would cause additional burden for the low-income tenants that we would be concerned with. So that's something that Micah here opposes and that a lot of our advocates oppose as well. It has not moved forward since it was introduced, but it is something to keep on your radar. Another bill was introduced just in the past couple of weeks, and this is House Bills 4910, 4911. These are two tie-barred bills, which means they have to pass together in order to take effect. And they change the way that emotional support animals can be received in properties. So they would require and penalize anyone who does not meet these requirements. They would require tenants to have documentation that their emotional support animal is legitimate from a healthcare provider. If that healthcare provider or the tenant falsely represents that the emotional support animal is medically necessary, they can be subject to a whole slew of penalties, including eviction, as well as 90 days imprisonment, $500 fee, or 30 days community service. And those are penalties that could apply to either the healthcare provider or the tenant. So I'm going to put up our first poll here because here at the office we don't have a good sense of how this bill may impact folks in the field. So we want to know, let me launch this. We want to know if these kind of penalties would impact your clients. And I have a couple options for you to respond. You can pick more than one. But let us know if it actually would affect the clients by putting them at risk of eviction, making it harder for them to find housing. if that additional documentation of having to get a letter from your healthcare provider would be a burden. Or, of course, if you don't think it would have any kind of impact because your clients don't have emotional support animals, then let us know that too. It will affect, I think, whether or not we oppose or just remain neutral on this bill. And it looks like people are responding, so I'm going to give it just another minute or so for people to kind of take a look at that. Obviously, I know that you guys haven't gone and looked at the bill itself, so hopefully the kind of summary we've provided gives you enough information. But if you have more questions about these two bills, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about it with you.
Yeah, and we got a question from Kristen. She's curious to know, for folks in the field, how resistant or supportive are healthcare professionals in providing this documentation?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
So this bill does set up a hotline that would require the Department of Health and Human Services to receive tips about whether or not someone is suspected of abusing emotional support animals. So I don't know what kind of communications the department will be putting out to healthcare providers and how they're treating that now. Right now, documentation that is accepted is just a registration of an emotional support animal, not the kind of letter from the healthcare provider. So that would be a great thing for us to kind of put out there and know if anybody wants to respond to that question.
So far, nobody has, at least on this call.
We'll kind of add it to our list of inquiries as we're thinking about this bill.
Okay.
All right, looks like we're good.
Yeah.
All right, are the results visible on the screen, Jason? Or do I just need to read them out?
There, they are now. I don't know what happened.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so it looks like about half of you say that it will make it harder for your clients to find housing. 21% of you said it may put your clients at risk of eviction. I'm assuming those are clients that are already in housing that have emotional support animals. 36% said the documentation would be a burden. 36% of you say, I don't know, and I suspected that more of you would be in that category. So as you kind of think about this, if you discover that it will become something that you are worried about, let us know, or ask around and let us know what you hear. Because again, that's something that is a bipartisan package of bills. So it may be something that actually has some movement. Well,
interestingly enough, Mark has commented that on the Senate side, there are 3 bills being up for committee hearing this Thursday in Senate Local Government on emotional support animals.
Oh, good to know.
SB 608 through 610.
Thank you. Missed those. And that's committee this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
This Thursday.
All right. We may be putting out some communications about this then. Thanks, guys. Okay. So I think that's it for our state updates. We've got that. Oh, we don't have it on here. Jason, talk to us about state IDs.
Your favorite topic.
I put the agenda out in advance and asked if you guys have anything to add. You always say no.
In your defense, I think I went off script because I think I was supposed to provide this update earlier and then didn't. So under the budget wins. So anyway, state IDs. Yeah, everybody's favorite topic. So first off, while I'm thinking about it, there is actually a webinar tomorrow. That's a coordinated effort between the ID Task Force and us here at the Coalition on taking advantage of the state ID fee waiver program through the Secretary of State. It's the same training that we were offering earlier this year. We just decided to take a hiatus because the interest in the trainings were starting to dwindle. But after a several months break, we've received a number of inquiries from folks in the field about when this was going to be offered again. So tomorrow at noon, so there you go. It's and we haven't, to be completely transparent, haven't talked about game plan after this. I think we're kind of waiting to see how the reception goes. We got about 90 folks registered so far, which is definitely down from where we were earlier in the year. But at the same time, we're also hearing from folks that they didn't even know the program existed. So trying to figure out how to crack that nut and get this information into people's hands. In terms of legislative things that are happening, so there was kind of a swirl of activity around the budget, which I referenced earlier. The big thing being that there was $226,000 that was allocated for vital docs through the budget process. About 126 of that is allocated for the central registry, and still waiting for some details about how exactly that program is going to work out. And I think the central registry folks are vetting some documents and all of that. But it sounds like it's going to be a relatively comparable process to Secretary of State. There will be a form, and they'll ask for the HMIS ID. And by form, I mean a verification letter from service provider with HMIS ID, and then folks would receive a fee waiver. The remaining roughly 90K that's being set up for reimbursing the local county clerk's office. And the last we heard, and of course this is subject to change, agencies would front the money and then put in a request through DHHS to get reimbursed for their clients who are literally homeless, and then DHHS would reimburse the agencies for those funds. Like I said, still moving target with both of those processes, so things might be subject to change. But we were talking through all of this at the last State ID Task Force meeting last week, and this looked like how things were going to be shaking out. So part of the process was Representative Tommy Brown introduced a bill, House Bill 4853, which caught a lot of folks by surprise because they didn't understand how that fit into all of the stuff that's going on budget-wise. As it turns out, it was just trying to codify in regulations that folks who are literally homeless could get their fee waiver whenever they're going through the MDHHS Central Registry. So as far as we understand, that is now part of the regs, and folks are able to verify that they're literally homeless. But even once this money would run out, DHHS would be responsible for continuing to provide those birth records free of charge. So that's what that was about. I know we had a number of advocates reach out to us as those bills were going through, and Representative Brand's office was pretty upfront with us in our conversations with them that this was something that the governor's office had requested as part of the budget negotiations. So, so there we go. And trying to think if there's anything else at this point, and I think that's all the major issues. So.
Any questions?
No questions
we
yet.
We usually get a whole slew of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, being able to say, hey, join us for a training tomorrow, kind of takes some of the heat off, because a lot of questions, you can just show up at that webinar and ask all kinds of questions. And
you can look on our Facebook page for the link to the webinar, or our homepage as well, to our shiny new website. All right. Any other state updates, or is there anything that any of you would like to add to our agenda here with state updates that you know of that we've missed? We'll move on to federal, but feel free to send that our way, and we'll backtrack and report that out if you have anything. All right, federal updates.
Yay, let's talk federal updates. Wanted to start off by just giving people an update on what's been happening at the federal level with respect to legislation. It's been on the agenda of presidential candidates now for quite some time. We saw a slew of things introduced previously by a number of presidential candidates. Now we have Kamala Harris that's introduced the Ending Homelessness Act of 2019 that was introduced on the 16th. And in essence, what it does is establish federal grant programs that address unmet needs for people experiencing homelessness, and it also increases funding for existing programs, including the Housing Trust Fund, the National Housing Trust Fund, as well as project-based rental assistance and project-based vouchers. We're talking about pretty big chunks of change that are being included here. So we're looking at $1 billion per year over 5 years, basically for the creation of emergency relief acts that help people to address unmet needs, and really targeting areas where there is the highest need across the country. So $1 billion per year for the National Housing Trust Fund, which is a major infusion of capital that could be invested in developing affordable housing across the country. Of course, there's no specific area that would be targeted for that would be money to be allocated and distributed across the country specifically. $500 million per year over 5 years for rental assistance vouchers, $50 million per year for project-based vouchers or for project-based rental assistance. And something to keep in mind is mandating that any housing receiving funding through those sources must maintain rent levels no higher than 30% of household income. So it's really targeting people who are in need and trying to make sure that it's not going to be a burden to them with respect to their rent. One thing to point out is that a similar bill was introduced on March 25th by Maxine Waters in the House, and that's something that has not made it to the floor yet in the House, but hoping that there will be some traction now that there is something in the House and Senate side that will have both houses addressing the issue or wanting to talk about the issue. Moving on to the budget, not much to report there. The budget process is still ongoing. As most of you may know, we did not have a new budget put in place for the current year. We're living with a continuing resolution yet again, and that is through November 21st. We're hoping that there'll be some action between now and then that will be positive. You do have a link to a document that's put out by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. It's something that we've shared with you in the past. That gives a very nice breakdown on a lot of the key elements that relate to the funds being utilized by our population. So why don't you just take a look at it. The House and the Senate are coming in well beyond what the executive branch has promoted and is asking for. Looking at increases in most of those areas and those line items, so please take a look at your leisure, but just want to let you know there isn't more to report on that. We'll share anything that we hear going forward. Also, not much to report with respect to the HUD proposed mixed status rules that we've talked about in the past. Nothing has been happening there. The HUD proposed equal access rule changes, also nothing new there. With respect to public charge, there has been an injunction that was put in place effective October 15th. There were 3 federal judges in New York, California, and Washington that weighed in on it separately. So that is on hold right now, so that cannot be implemented at the federal level until there's further review done on it. With respect to the HUD disparate impact, the public comment period has closed, so we're waiting to see what happens as a result of the work that's done there and the significant amount of public input that had been provided along the way, but nothing new to report here on that specifically. Does anybody have any questions on anything that I've gone over somewhat rapidly?
There's a lot of proposed rule changes that we've been trying to keep track of, lots of suggested things that could have a negative impact on the folks that we're working with. So we will just continue to follow that as we can and let you guys know when there's opportunity to submit public comment. The public charge rule, there was significant public comment that came in, and the administration still chose to move forward with it, which is a bit discouraging in terms of, you know, wanting to participate.
The public input was overwhelmingly against
yes.
The change.
Absolutely, and I suspect that with disparate impact, it will be very similar. So that can be a little disheartening as we try to rally the troops to submit comments, but it's still definitely worthwhile. It is still something that we need to continue to be letting the administration and the HUD know when rule changes come up that we feel very strongly would have negative impacts on the folks we're helping.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because even if it does not have the effect that we want it to, it may not change the course of HUD going forward. It at least puts HUD on notice in a formal way, so it's on record with respect to the volume of the amount of public input that's made, and I think that does speak volumes. And so going forward, we just need to keep the pressure on by making our voice heard.
I don't see any questions coming in, so we will move on to, this is kind of our catch-all of all of the updates that we have about MICAH. So
look at that beautiful piece of art.
You guys are the first to see the 2019 Homeless Awareness Month poster. We did a contest again this year, and Jason went out and recruited entries. We've received quite a few really good ones this year, but our committee voted for the one that you see on your screen. It is going to the printer this week. We will be sending it out to folks who have previously indicated they want to receive hard copies. If you are also interested in having some of these mailed to you, there are 11 by 17 posters. You can let Jason know. I have his email address on the screen. You can also let us know if you're holding any Homeless Awareness Month events. Many of you may have previously participated in the National Homeless Awareness Week, which I don't even know when that is this year, but I think it's probably the second week of November or so. But we have chosen to expand Michigan's awareness to a full month to capture all of the things that happen in November. And so part of our role is to put those events out for the public to know about and to help you publicize those. You can send us your information, flyers, calendar invites, whatever you have, you can send to Jason, and we will start promoting those on our social media so that it can have a reach into the audience that you may not have on your channels. And Jason, do you have anything else you want to say about Homeless Awareness Month?
Go forth and prosper.
All right. Another event that we have coming up is with our partners at Safe and Just Michigan and Still Standing Against Domestic Violence. This is November 14th, so coming up in a couple weeks. It is a free event, half-day event, focused on how we break down barriers to jobs and housing for justice-involved people. We have a really fantastic keynote speaker coming with Hassan Latif. He is out of Colorado, and he's going to be talking about programming to get folks with criminal records into housing and employment in his community out in Aurora. And we also have some really great panels to talk about what we're doing at the local level, both in our communities and at the state, as well as some exciting legislation that you may have heard about called Clean Slate. It's a package of bills that creates automatic expungement of records if you qualify. And they are currently working out the details. The bills have been introduced, but they're working out some of the logistics for some things that legislators have had some concerns about. And I believe it will be moving forward in, I want to say, the House this month and perhaps moving on to the Senate later this year. But this event will have a panel of folks talking about what that package of bill looks like and how we came to have it introduced and how you can get involved. So it is a free event. We're nearing capacity on our registration, but I have the link to register if you are interested. The event is open to service providers, to survivors, to crime victims, survivors, to individuals who are justice involved. So it's going to be a really diverse audience in the room. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. And then finally, how are we doing on time? We're still good. Very good. So finally, for those of you who have been with us for a while, you may remember that we do an annual in-person LAC meeting. And we try to do that either in November or December of the year. Looks like November generally gets a little hairy to try and schedule with all the Homeless Awareness Month activities going out in the state. So we've pushed it back to December and want to get that scheduled and see if anybody on the call would be interested in participating. I'm going to be sending out a survey to the broader group because we definitely just have a fraction of folks participate on the webinars out of the full group of folks who are part of our LAC communications. So I'm going to ask this of the group first, and then I'll send out a follow-up email. But for those of you who are still playing along with us right now, the question, is it not going to work? Oh, there it goes. Would you be interested? It looks like someone's raising their hand. If you have a question, you can send us that question or you just respond to the poll with a yes or a no or an I don't know. I'll just give you another second or two to respond. Looks like we've got the majority of folks who have responded so far. Wow, most of you guys are paying attention today. Excellent. Taking a break from eating your lunch to take a little quick poll. All right, so most of you said yes, which is excellent. For those of you who responded, I don't know, I'm hoping it's because you just don't know about your schedule or what's on the agenda, so we'll talk about that a little bit, and maybe we can move that I don't know to a yes. So in terms of thinking about when we want to have this meeting, launching another poll, we're looking at 2 dates in the first week of December, December 3rd, either in the morning or afternoon, or December 4th in the morning or afternoon. I know for those of you who want to participate, you probably want to check your calendars. So I'm going to leave this open for a little bit longer than usual while I talk through potential agenda items, so you have time to check your calendar and let us know. On our in-person meetings, we typically get together and have a really robust conversation about what we've done this past year, what we want to do moving forward. And so we'll do regular updates, make sure the group knows about anything that's happening that may require your attention with any of the priorities or state or federal legislation or policy changes that we follow throughout the year. But this year we also want to be a little bit more proactive with our budget work. As Jason told you, we had some really solid wins this year with our budget, but we also had some things that we were hoping to get across that finish line that didn't make it. For example, ESP is always something, the Emergency Shelter Program is always something that we advocate for. We got that continuation of the $18, but it's still not where we want it to be. So that's something that we regularly put in for, but there are other things that we'd like to see introduced in the budget process this year. So we want to have a good conversation about what budget items you guys are aware of that you would like to see included in our advocacy work for the next year's budget. And then in terms of the value of LAC with all of our folks around the state, it's always nice to hear about what local efforts are doing and how we can connect with that in a more meaningful way. So we'll also have an opportunity for us to just kind of talk about what is a priority in your communities and how that can be elevated to the state level, or how MICA can assist you with those efforts at the local level. And it looks like we got most people who voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Oh, good. We got that last vote in at the last second.
In there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, it looks like morning is people's preference. I guess I should have said we typically have this meeting in Lansing, and we try to maybe piggyback some opportunities to meet with legislators since you are in the state capitol during that day. So it looks like morning is the preference, but we've got a pretty even split between Tuesday the 3rd and Wednesday the 4th. So thank you for letting us know. As I said, we'll be sending this out to the larger group and get that scheduled sooner rather than later so you guys can get it on your calendar. But in the meantime, if you are interested in attending, I'd put a hold on your calendar for both of those days until we get the final date out to the group.
And our comrades from the Great White North have asked for us to set up a call-in option as well.
Thank you. We've tried to do that in the past with some varying degree of success due to technology, but it's something that we will absolutely attempt to do. It's hard to get some participation on some things, like when we break out into smaller groups. So you may miss out on some of that conversation, but I know it's hard to get down here from up north.
Yeah.
So we'll absolutely set something up and get you connected on as much as we can in that day.
And Michelle, I hope the rumors of snow in Marquette are greatly exaggerated.
Yeah. Not ready for that. Any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay. I think we're wrapping up here. We always kind of have a space here at the end of the call for you guys to let us know of anything that's happening in your community. As I said, at our in-person meeting, we definitely want to have the opportunity for some broader conversation about local efforts, but every call, feel free to let us know what's going on, and you can send it in via the question option on GoToWebinar. Do we have anything yet, Jason?
No, other than Ryan's suggestion that perhaps we could have the LAC meeting up north this time.
Only if you can get the legislators up there for us to visit.
Yes. Also, if we did that, we'd have to move it to like June. Although, I don't know, I'm looking at Eric. Maybe we can allocate some funding next year for a little retreat. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, Ryan's place.
Actually, the suggestion is for a winery. Well, so we either do a winery or ice skating now. There's lots of suggestions for what this could look like.
I think is next year our 5th year of LAC?
It would be, yeah.
Oh, guys, we got to start planning. It might be worthwhile to
So we'd be having a legislative skate? Interesting. The possibilities are endless, right?
It'd be a great big skate.
There. I love it.
So, you know, we've framed this as things that are happening at the local level, but just keep in mind that we're looking for other things that you have on your radar screen. It may be local, it may be something else you've heard of at the state level that we haven't talked about here that you think you'd like to share or have us put on the radar screen, or you may be affiliated with other organizations that are doing things at a state level as well and have heard about different things that we may want to be aware of. So, you know, feel free to share anything that you think may be pertinent to this group.
And we've had folks in the past send us documents that you want us to share with the group about things that they can participate in. feel free to send those to any of us, and we will be sending out a follow-up email with some information about all of this legislation in the next day or two, so we can attach documents and send that out to the group if you have something that you want to send after the call. All right, anything else coming in?
Nope.
Wow, guys, we are efficient today. We're going to let you go 15 minutes early.
Wait, got a big
Something's coming.
item there.
Oh,
No, talking about the next meeting.
No, somebody is. So, no, that's fine, Kristen. So Kristen asked if any of us were aware of efforts going on around the 2020 census and shelter outreach.
So I have been reading things, but we have not participated in anything nor had any conversations about it. Eric, I'm looking at you. Has Jerry with HMIS had any conversations that you can share?
No, I'm not familiar with anything specifically.
Kristen, is there anything going on that you are aware of that you can share with us? I know you probably need to take a second to type something out now, so I'm not going to rush you. But I will say back in the spring when we did some meet and greets with some state legislators, we did have someone who pushed very strongly for us to be thinking about some census work. So I know that there is interest in making sure that individuals experiencing homelessness are counted this time around.
Yeah, I would offer that there are other organizations that are trying to take the lead on this issue at a local level. The Michigan Municipal League, for example, is trying to encourage, and they have I would say a fairly robust initiative underway to encourage municipalities to be engaged in this process. And this would be a good opportunity for you as an individual or your organization or local COCs, local planning bodies, to reach out to municipalities to help connect with them to see if indeed they are going to be doing anything in this area, because all municipalities have a vested interest in making sure that they identify all of the people that are living in their boundaries. And one of those reasons is because it affects the eligibility for certain types of funding that they might be able to access. So they have some motivation here, and I think getting the foot in the door and talking with the right people may assist you in making sure that you can be a part of that process and ensure that the people you're working with get counted.
So Lynn and Ottawa County has offered that census rep actually came to their most recent COC meeting.
Excellent.
And they actually had a timeline that includes outreach to shelters.
Good.
Okay.
So assuming that other outreach workers for the census probably have comparable timelines, it's just a matter of getting connected.
Lynn, I think it might be helpful if you were able to get us the contact information, or you could reach out to that individual. It would be nice to see if they have other contacts that they can share that we can try to get people connected to. If indeed other COCs or local planning bodies would like to have somebody come and talk to them about it, I think if we're able to try to make that connection, we can help facilitate that, because I'm not sure how universally strong those outreach efforts are with respect to speaking at groups like yours.
That was my follow-up question. Lynn, did you guys invite the census worker, or did they contact you? I'll let you type your response.
We have an email address.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Now, Lynn, I noticed that Jason did want to open your mic up. I would take that personally.
We don't want to put people on the spot if they're in noisy areas.
So Kristen also offered up that she has a student organization at Wayne State with motivated social work students who would like to target this population to increase participation. And they'd be willing to reach out to hand in the Detroit COC and other local initiatives. But just curious if there was other plans in place.
So let us internally kind of monitor some stuff, and that's something we can add to our agenda for our next meeting. Which is I don't want to stop the conversation if people are bringing more information in about the census or others. But I do want to note that we're going to cancel our November meeting because we're going to have one like the week or 2 weeks after that in December or in person. So go ahead and take the November meeting off of your calendar and plan on December 3rd or 4th for our in-person, and we will have call-in options available as well. Anything else coming in, Jason?
No, other than, in my defense, Lynn doesn't have a working microphone on her computer.
All right. Well, now we'll say goodbye, but if you have other thoughts or questions or want to follow up on anything that we talked about today, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we will get back to you and look for a follow-up email from me soon with some more information. And I think that's it.
Thanks, everybody. Glad to be back on track. Glad you didn't forget about us. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good day, guys.